Hello everyone, and how are you guys today? Well, I am here, and as you can see by my shirt, I am talking about astrology today. So I hope you guys are ready. Baby Crone is finally talking and sharing with you guys the knowledge that she's acquired about astrology. And of course, I've gotten some of my information from Lady Crone as well. We both study astrology together. I cannot do it without her. So let's begin my presentation for the day and of the week. So today, first episode. Oh yes, I didn't even introduce this. Hello guys, I'm going to be having a series about astrology and where I teach you how to read your birth chart. And today is the first episode of Astrology 101, and this is your little crash course. So today I'm going to be breaking down elements and modes. So really quickly, what is astrology? Well, astrology is the study of the metaphysical connection. So meta is like reality in a sense. Breaking the fourth wall, breaking the fourth dimension. So it's like the connection to the fourth and higher dimensions, to the physical third dimension that we're in and living our reality in. And that is, and how does astrology do this? By connecting the planets that are in the universe, that float out there in space, and connected to human life, and therefore they're able to also predict what can happen on Earth. It doesn't have to be specifically about humans because we are on Earth. So therefore whatever happens to Earth is going to affect us too because we're earthly creatures. So a little bit breakdown first is that astrology originated in Mesopotamia, and through that it was passed on. By passed on, we mean by conquered, through revolutions and taking over and conquest. So through all of this, it evolved through Greek, Egyptian, Jerusalem, and finally European, where this is now, instead of astrology being used as an everyday predictive tool of how to understand the universe and our everyday lives, it's now used for fun and quick fun bits and tidbits and like, oh, what is your sun sign today? Oh, I'm an Aquarius. Oh, really? And stuff like that. But no. Astrology is way more than just your sun sign, which I'll break down in a few episodes later. So another way, as I talked about, it was used to so astrology brings astronomy and brings philosophy together to break down the human psyche. That's how it's differentiated from being used to predict events. Life events are different from humans, so you can look at it two different ways. Astrology is very versatile. It's learning a whole nother language. As well as, because astronomy is a science and it's mathematical, it's able to be predicted and mapped out. We've been living on Earth, has been existing for billions of years now, and therefore we haven't been destroyed yet, and we're most likely not going to be destroyed because that's how sturdy our system is. So therefore we're able to predict the future through astrology. So I bet you guys are wondering, what are elements? Because there are many different connotations to elements, and specifically in astrology there are 4 specific elements that are important. We have right here fire, air, water, and earth. Now, these are grouped into, you can group them into 2 different pairs. At the very bottom we have the 2 harmonious ones, which is fire and air. They are very harmonious. They get along because they share similar qualities in how they act. On the contrary, earth and water are harmonious together because, for the same reason, they share the same ideas and qualities as well, so therefore they're able to get along. However, there's also opposites too. So fire and water are opposites because how do you put out fire? Throw water on it, right? So another way, another polar opposite is air and earth. Well, air can whip up earth like a tornado, but earth is so sturdy that air can't really penetrate it too much. So that's how they're polar opposites, because they can't cancel each other out. And these elements are really important because these are the 4 basic elements that the world that we live in operates. Light is heat, fire, the air we breathe in, water, liquids we consume every day, earth, everything physical you can touch, the 4 elements right here in your everyday reality. And this is what makes up your personality as well. So I talked about modes. These elements can be categorized into modes. And these 3 modes are cardinal, fixed, and mutable, which represent seasons, which I talked about in my first video when I talked about the start of fall and what does fall bring. And I talked a little bit about how the fall has a cardinal month, a fixed month, and a mutable month. Well, that's because they represent 3 different distinct energies that are used to operate through everyday life, because you have to start something, but also you have to put work into something, but also you have to turn that something in and reflect on it. So these are the 3 stages of life, essentially, if you think about it. And each of these, they're broken, so there's 12 zodiac signs. And these 12 zodiac signs are broken into 4 different elements, as I said, and these 4 elements each have 1 cardinal, fixed, and mutable aspect to them. So that's a little bit, but we'll break that down later. So we're going to talk about temperament. Now, temperament is about a quality, as we was talking about earlier when we was talking about modalities just recently on the previous slide. And a temperament is something that's innate, something that's natural and basic to you. It's like your nature, what you're born with. And these characteristics are hot, moist, dry, and cold. I will break them down. There are also 4. And these can be combined to make these 2 qualities out of 4 can be combined and rearranged to create the 4 elements that we have, which I will also break down a little later in the video. So these 4, hot, moist, dry, and wet, they all represent the backbone of a personality because they create the elements. Without elements, we wouldn't have hot or moist, because what would hot and moist be if there wasn't fire or water or air, if you understand what I mean. So this is another way how we describe our natural and physical world. When we touch water, it feels moist, right? And when we're in that cold air, it feels frigid and cold, but sometimes you can get moisture from it. And when you're near heat, you feel the hotness coming and radiating off of the fire. So these are the 4 temperaments that we're going to be talking about. So hot, as you see right here in the picture, as the sun is circular, but here it looks kind of hazy because it is so hot in the atmosphere, because the sun is radiating its light, that the atmosphere of the earth is being distorted. So hot makes things energize and move. So therefore the particles in the atmosphere are moving much more faster, which is why the light is being distorted. So this is a quality of hot. Hot disturbs things, but it's also, it can be suffocating, because if you're in a really humid place, and a humidifier is also good for helping clean your sinuses and help purify yourself inside through steam. However, it could be too stuffy and you could feel suffocated. However, this hotness is like a drive, like a force of passion. Next, we're going to move on to its opposite. If you think about hot, we have cold. So what is cold? It's very slow. It's very zodiac, what do you want to do when you're in the cold? You want to cuddle up, you want to bundle up, you want to cluster up essentially, you want to compact together. So interestingly enough, in outer space, speaking of astronomy real quick, life on other planets can exist when they're far away from their sun, which is their heat, because these life forms are very microscopic. However, this cold temperature allows them to live and able to evolve more easily, because if they're in a hot environment, they're constantly moving. They don't have time to really evolve and put the energy into what they need to do. But when you're cold, you're able to, like, I like to think of it as like being like intimate, because you're able to really put like the time into it and really get to know it and become one. So that's how hot and cold are similar in a way. They both can house life, even though they're polar opposites of each other in a sense and canceling each other out, but they get along very perfectly. And when you're, for example, cold temperatures in the hot atmosphere, as we was talking about a hot atmosphere, a cold atmosphere, you're able to see crystals and stuff like that, and light reflect differently because the particles are much more slower, and if they're much more clustered together, they're going to affect the light differently in the atmosphere too. So therefore, if they're clumping together, like snow has to fall, when there's rain up in the sky, it's collecting moisture. So therefore, in a sense, cold gives moisture. Which brings us to wet, because wet is essentially moisture if you think about it. Because when you touch something with your fingers that's liquidy, you say, oh, this is wet. But then the debate is the liquids like water really wet? That's a debate in the science world, believe it or not. So moisture livens things up, because water gives life, and life evolved from water essentially, because water housed all the nutrients that these microscopic life forms were able to use to evolve. But these can also be in cold temperatures as well, which is, as I was talking about, why cold and wet atmospheres are very good components for creating life. So therefore, think about us. We're water. When we get wet, we plump up because our body's taking in more water. So we also get more juicy in a sense, because we're creating more water. Well, not creating, we're intaking more water, so therefore we're able to be more watery, but too much water can also drown you in a sense. But which was talking about like a negative right here, how it can eat you away. Think about, for example, river bends and sides, all the erosion from the water constantly brushing up against the land. It eventually starts off like a riverside this big, and then suddenly it gets like this over the years. That's what water can do if there's too much. So it can eat away at you. And dry. Who likes to be dry? Because when you think dry, you think crack, you think lack of moisture, which is an opposite of wet. You see the polarities here? So dry is highly combustible, because if think of something that's extremely dry. If it's dry, it's brittle, it doesn't have any moisture, so therefore the friction can easily just spark a flame. However, it's like what's left when you take away the water, so it gives you clarity in a sense, because you're able to see clearly, because water can distort things because it can move. However, earth is solid, so when you're like dry, you're seeing what something is to the extreme sense, because too much dryness can be really bad. But it shows a new potential, because even though something's dry, you're able to, you can re-moisturize it and start afresh and start anew. So elements, we are halfway through the presentation, guys. So the elements are so think about elements, for example, like the periodic table. They represent the forming blocks of what makes up the physical world. Well, as I talked about, fire, air, water, and earth make up the elements and basic fundamentals of the physical world and what makes us up as humans as well, both inwardly and outwardly, physically and psychologically. But also chemistry comes from alchemy, which worked with changing things in their physical property, basically being a magician in a sense, being able to make a metal, for example, into computer. This is modern day alchemy in your face, and they call it chemistry. So, like I said, what is fire? It is hot plus dry. You remember, very hot, very dry. Like I said, very combustible. However, this means it has a lot more movement and it's active because it has the courage, because it's not afraid to take things to the extreme. And dryness is able to withstand heat because there's no moisture, so therefore the fire is able to burn and really consume, and that's why fire's very passionate and very overbearing at times. But also it can easily burn out because then you're just left with dryness because you've burnt out everything that sustains you essentially. Air, it can be hot and wet, like moisture. When rain comes down, it can be hot, it can be cold. It depends on how the temperature is in the atmosphere at the moment. And think about air, like air waves, like going through the air, like radio waves. That is like your mental waves, your intelligence, how you're able to think essentially. But like breath, air is what you're able to produce, so what you're able to create with your ideas. And also communication is a way to be mental because you're sharing what's inside of you and bringing it out to the physical world and sharing it with people around you. And we are social creatures as humans, and that's how we build social circles. Water. I chose this picture specifically for water to show you that water isn't just H2O that you drink or something inside of a container that's tangible. I wanted you to see that water is like an ocean, something deep, dark, vast, and something that has levels that you and I or humans haven't even reached to yet. These are what the elements are around us every day and what makes us up as humans and our psyche, because we're talking about astrology. So therefore the zodiac signs have these qualities, and if you can understand these qualities, you can understand why, for example, an Aries is very hot-headed, fast-tempered, and energetic because they're fire. So water is cold and wet. We was just talking about air. And remember, air and water are like partners. What they share in common is their wet aspect. So water can give birth to life, as I was talking about earlier, which life is an emotional process because I have no experience, but the 9 months that you're in gestation, your hormones are all out of whack, but also the baby's inside like a liquid fluid, so therefore that's like water essentially, and it's giving birth to life. And if you water a plant, you're giving nutrients to the plant and nourishing it. So water is able to give life and able to sustain life. And in able to do that, you have to be really sensitive and in tune and being able to reach these depths. Because if you're able to reach these depths, you're able to like purify, because water, for example, is used for baptism, because water is used for cleansing because it can rinse off of you. So moving on, we're going to talk about earth, the very last element, and this is something that is cold and dry, which makes sense because when you feel earth, like if you touch it or lay your head on the earth, it may feel cold, it may feel warm, depending on the time of season and day. So therefore, the ground is like the material world. Earth, for example, literally earth that we're on is called earth. How ironic is that if you think about it? But earth, if you're dry, you lack moisture, so therefore you're able to not have emotions and able to ration and think practically and not go off of how you feel or act irrational. And you're also able to give life because you're able to hold, if you get moisture inside of you, you are able to hold onto that moisture. And you're basically a container holding this moisture, and you're going to get dry again because something else is going to take that water out of you because you're just holding it and sustaining it for them, because earth is able to work with the physical world, the natural world, the plants, and really understand what it takes to nurture life on earth, essentially. Lastly, modalities. This is how you approach life. As I was talking about, cardinal, fixed, or mutable. You're either going to start something with a positive, go-getting energy, or you're gonna have an approach to life that when you start something, you're gonna get stuck on it because you really want to be meticulous and get it right. Or you could just be wanting to get it done, be like, oh, let me rush through this, I want to move on to the next project. These are the different approaches to life, and this is what the modalities explain. The cardinal means that you're direct. They're really good at being leaders because they're able to think of new ideas and able to think of something that hasn't been done and start something new. Now this is for each element. We have a cardinal earth, cardinal water, cardinal air, and cardinal fire. So each of these elements are cardinal in their own respect. So you could be like emotionally ready to start like when you start a project, you're ready to like put your emotions into it. Or if you're earth, when you start a project, you really want to nurture it and take your time with it. Where if you're like fire, you will really want to start something quickly and get it like starting right now. You're impatient, like, no, we got to do this right now, like today. Or if you're like air, you're able to communicate with somebody and be like, hey, I have this idea. See how these elements are playing out in your everyday life? Fixed, you're consistent because you're able to sturdy, you're able to really get into the hard work, the nitty gritty. You're just like, I know what it's like because I stand where I stand. I know how to do this. I have put all my energy into this, which is nothing wrong with that. Because through that, you're able to nurture things. And, like, we're not all separate here. We're all going to work together. So if somebody sees you, like, digging, like, deep into something, maybe you're too overboard. Maybe, like, a mutable sign might come in and be like, hey, maybe I can help take over this for you. I could see you're really into this. Or maybe someone that's cardinal could walk in and see somebody that's really like head buried deep into their work and understand that they could have like maybe a little bit more compassion because they understand how hard it could be to finish a project, because maybe they might not have finished a project, or they understand that they lose the thrill. Cardinals lose the thrill when it comes to a project. So when somebody's fixed and they're able to do the project, be on that time, that rhythm, be organized because they have like a set fixed schedule that works for them and they're able to maneuver to the full task and abilities that they can. And then we have mutable. Ironically enough, this picture right here shows the whole process stage of cardinal, fixed, mutable, but I really want to focus on this picture right here because this shows the emerging of the change, where you're transforming and you're now starting a new process. So, sorry, my eye's itchy. So when it comes to the ending of a project, it's like, okay, what's next? I've been working on this project. Now I have to adjust to not working on this project. What am I going to do to fill time now that I'm not doing this project? That's basically what Mutable's about. Having that time to reflect on what you just did and learn from it and be like, okay, what do I want to take with me when I start something next, or when I come across something else? It's like building all these experiences and using these experiences for the next experiences coming, because you're able to transform and grow through these experiences in life, and you don't let them hold you back, and you're able to metamorph like a butterfly essentially. And I don't have something to end this PowerPoint off with, so I will just talk about a summary of everything we just talked about, because that was a lot I covered in 28 minutes. So quickly, we're going to talk about elements. They're everything around you. I know we're talking about the esoteric world and the things that make up us humans that we can't see, but to help you also think about it, these elements are in your everyday world, and if you just think about it differently, for example, poof, I just swooshed air at you. So there's different ways you can look at these elements in your everyday life, and once you start observing how these elements work in your everyday life, you can start thinking about how they could affect you and your personality. And speaking about modalities, which was your cardinal, fixed, and mutable, you could talk about how do you approach a situation. Do you like it? Do you get stuck in it? Are you ready to move on? And if you look at how you approach things differently, you can start thinking about how certain elements, which would be zodiac signs, which we'll get onto later, are in you that are having you act in these certain ways. And if you look at it in the birth chart and the houses, they will tell you what area in life that is, but that is for something different. Woo! And then lastly, the temperaments, which is hot, air, cold, dry, and wet. I don't know how air got in there, but those represent the backbones of everything, because they describe. Think about it like an atom. They are the building blocks that make up the elements. So therefore, really think about how you feel when you're in something. Like, do you feel like energized? Do you feel cool? Do you feel like it just dried you out and you feel like you just need to feel like emotions maybe? Or do you feel like you've been around to like many people and you're just like, ooh, I just need to decompress and get away and like dry out essentially? And these will start telling you how different parts of your life essentially is affected by these elements. So thank you. I will see you guys next week to talk about more astrology, and I hope you guys enjoy this, and soon you will be able to learn your birth chart by the time this crash course is over. I will talk to you guys later. Mwah.